Yay! First highlight of the evening. So we welcome Lisa Peters to the stage. So such a pleasure to have Lisa here as our guest speaker. So I'll spend a couple of minutes to introduce Lisa, not formally introduce, but talking a little bit about her background, so you have an appreciation on who Lisa is. So let me actually stop sharing the slides so we can see Lisa and myself better. So maybe start with how we connected. So I met Lisa, can't remember which year, but at least a good 10 years ago or more, when I was working at Unilever. One of my last projects at Accenture, actually. And she really struck me as this very down-to-earth, leader. And I can't remember, Lisa, if you were a senior manager there, already a partner, but I remember really fondly, of you. And you're very approachable, very kind person. And and then we reconnected after many years. So Lisa, she's been with Accenture for 27 years. She joined as was still Anderson Consulting. She works predominantly in the public sector space and looks after the government portfolio for Accenture. So as a result, she has worked a lot in Canberra, has very, very solid experience in the FMCG space. And she describes her management style as inclusive. In the personal front, Lisa, she is a Sutherlandshire girl, using her own words. So it will be interesting for Leanne here, who is the CIO for the Sutherlandshire Council. And I don't know if Simona is here because Simona was a former CIO. And Lisa has European heritage, which means that she has traveled to Europe a number of times to be in touch with her relatives. She's obsessed about all things cycling and mountain biking, and loves to take her dog for a walk to keep her sane as well, in addition to exercise, which is one of her main things. She loves challenge, loves learning and growing. And a few funny facts, interesting facts, I should say, about Lisa. She loves listening to Daft Punk when writing proposals. When I learned that, I was like, wow, that's something new. No, she finds that really helps with her creative juices, listening to Daft Punk. Barcelona is one of her favorite cities, and she's a certified lifeline coach, which I was very surprised. And when asked what she would do if she was not with Accenture and work in the SAP space, she said that potentially she would become a psychologist. So that's Lisa. Thanks so much, Lisa, for being here. Such an honor, such a pleasure. Really good.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're super welcome. So how about we start, Lisa, with a little bit of your journey, how you became, you work with IBM and understand, and how do you know your journey to become the managing director at Accenture today? Tell us a little bit about your career and your professional history, as much as little as you like.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So yeah, I did. I studied computer science at university, actually with Leanne, who's here on this call. We went to university together, so that's how far back we go. Yeah, but I mean I loved sort of the sciencey subjects when I was doing my HSC, and so I ended up doing computer science. And then after I finished, I got a job as a developer, an AS400 programmer, which is the IBM mid-range mainframe. I was an RPG programmer for a few years, but then I quickly realized I was not cut out to be a programmer. It was never really my thing. And I applied for a job at Anderson Consulting and got it, and went straight away implementing SAP, which was much more, I guess, more to my liking in terms of my strengths, because I could really go in, find out what the organization was wanting from the solution, and then go away and configure it in SAP rather than doing all of the development side of things. So my first job was configuring a warehouse for AstraZeneca, out at North Ryde, figuring out, you know, what order they had all their goods in so that they could put away and pick their slow moving goods, their fast moving goods, all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of what took me on the path of doing SAP work, which is what I've done for the last 27 years.
Amazing. And would you like to talk a little bit about your passion for SAP? Because it sounds very geeky, very nerdy, but I totally relate. I still remember when I was at uni, how the first time I saw the diamond shape, you know, diagram, and I was like, I really want to work with this too. And eventually, you know, it happened. So tell us a little bit about why you're so passionate about SAP.
Well, I think because it's been such, I guess, a domineering solution, and it's also evolved so much over time. So for someone like me who's got a real thirst and love of learning, because the software kept developing and they'd add more modules and more complexity, and they go into different industries, like there was a banking version and a utility version and those sorts of things. So for me, it meant that I kept learning, even though I was still implementing SAP. I was actually still learning more and more about SAP and what it could do and those sorts of things. So that's really it. It feeds my love of learning.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, the complexity and I think I always think about SAP being very robust and reliable. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. In terms of your current role as MD at Accenture, what are the key challenges and opportunities that you're willing to share here with us?
So in terms of the key challenge is to continue to do good work with public sector. You know, that's my focus, federal and state government, and to continue to help them as they do their business transformations and modernise their systems and digitise and so on. So that's really my challenge, is how do we keep helping government improve the lives of citizens and their employees. That's the key thing. And probably for me, I mean, I'm in a people business, as in, you know, Accenture is a consulting company. It's all about people. So how do we look after our people, and not only our Accenture people, but when we're working with, you know, customers, how do we look after our teams collaboratively, our partners in the ecosystem? Because it's all about, you know, a human business, even though we're using a lot of technology to power it. But how do we look after our people and bring the best of our people to the work that we do? So that's something that I constantly strive for, is how am I working collaboratively and bringing out the best of myself, and the people I work with.
Thanks, Lisa. And you also mentioned briefly before the challenge of retaining, not just attracting, but also retaining their best talent. I don't like to use that word best talent, but retaining people and attracting. So any thoughts, any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's about having conversations and talking to people. I think in my experience, when people leave Accenture, typically it's because no one really took the time to talk to them potentially and really look after them and really grow them, you know. So that's what I think the key is to how you keep people. And I was, you know, I have this sort of saying, and it's not my saying, but like every belly button counts. You know, everyone should be there to have a conversation with them and find out more about them, not just what you're doing at work and what particular design issue you're trying to solve, but what's going on in their lives and what floats their boat and those sorts of things. So I like to find that out about people and have little jokes, hopefully appropriate jokes, you know, because I think it's that human connection. I mean, I've been with Accenture for as long as I have because of the connections I've made and the people who have looked after me. So that's what I like to do in return. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're talking. I mean, this is completely unscripted, everyone. But I'm thinking, and the saying in my mind, once Accenture, always Accenture. I'm just thinking about the fact that so many people now leave Accenture and go back again and again. I've seen when I was there, people. The boomerangs, yeah, it's fascinating.
Exactly.
There is something about that organization, and
Yeah.
with my experience having worked with IBM and NSG and Young in Brazil, and joined Accenture, which was technically my competitor, from Brazil. I was with IBM, was the last company. I remember, how pleased I was and how much I learned. Going to St. Charles, a couple of times. I felt so privileged, so much fun, hard work, but a lot of learning and growth. Yeah, so I'm very grateful. Thanks, Lisa. So, in terms of the, let's move to mindful leadership. So we spoke about, and I listened to your podcast as well with precision, leading by example. So, what mindful leadership means to you, and you already covered a lot in your previous answer, but I would like to comment a little bit about mindful leadership, leading by example.
I think mindful leadership for me, I increasingly think about what I'm doing, how I'm responding to a particular, challenge and those sorts of things, because I know when I react and perhaps don't react the way I'd like to react, then that has that sort of effect on everyone else that I'm with. And so I find increasingly for me that mindful leadership is actually a lot about how I'm turning up and how I'm behaving and responding. Because as I said, it just has an impact on everyone else. So I'm sort of doing lots of work on myself because I think that's ultimately what brings out the best in what I do, is if I can be at my best. Yeah.
Brilliant, Lisa. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a given for everyone who is across the philosophy that we champion here. The saying that comes to mind is who you are speaks so loud that I cannot hear what you say. So it's how you're showing up, and it'll tell so much about you that I know your behaviors, and that's has a huge impact to people around you. So leadership in the 21st century, definitely there's a big component of how we show up. Let's move to declaration. So your favorite declaration of the Mindful CEO Manifesto, what would that be?
Well, the one we're doing tonight, the multitasking one, because I'm a work in progress with that, to be honest. It's hard, right? I have this little post-it note that's next to my computer and it says focus, right? Because I literally, sometimes I have to look at it because I'll be kind of having a little peek down at my phone whilst I'm on a Teams call, and I'm thinking about all these emails that are still coming into my email box. And it's funny that how, if I look back over all of the time, that I've worked, how I survived all those years ago without a phone, and I didn't even have a laptop when I first joined Accenture. You just got given whatever the client had was the PC you got, and that was it, right? It was not till many years later that I actually got a laptop as well. But now there's just so much distraction. So I think for me, I easily can get into the mode of, I can multitask. This is cool. I'm really listening to what's going on, but I'm not. I know I'm not. So I have to train my brain. It's that muscle that needs training. And that's why I have the little note next to my screen to remind me, stop, multitasking and looking around and focus on what's actually being discussed. So yeah, that's the one I like, because I do find it actually quite hard. So I like a challenge.
Thanks, Lisa, for the honesty. And again, you're not alone. No, action addiction, it's a challenge, I think, for many of us. And we do get a dopamine kick, so it's hard. There are neurochemicals involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of the movement, the Mindful CEO community, you're very busy. Your time is precious, and you've been being a regular here attending. I feel so, glad that you're able to make and tonight being the guest speaker. So why do you think it's important? Why are you being part of it?
I think I just love connecting with people. So I think it was Alex Anjanacci who first posted on LinkedIn. And I saw his post and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to go along and find out more about that. I think that that's what it's all about for me, is just connecting with people and learning more. Because if I can learn some tips and tricks from the people here and apply it to what I do tomorrow, say, that's what I love being able to do. So yeah, learn and make connections. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Self-care. So exercise is a big thing for you, right? So in terms of self-care, what would you say is your number one strategy, tips? You mentioned, meditation, that you practice meditation, you tend to set intention, which I was very surprised and, pleased to see that. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty exercise obsessed and have been for a very, very long time. So that's probably the one area of my life that I know I don't need to worry too much about. I think the challenge for me is just taking too much on from a work standpoint, and getting overwhelmed by how much I seemingly create myself and think and perceive I have to do. So rationalizing that and really, being organized about what I do need to do, what I don't need to do, because it's all about me. On really, it's the expectations I create on myself, that I have to do this or that someone needs this by now. And sure, there are deadlines and things like that, but it's really actually about me sort of sitting down and questioning, now, when do I need to do that by? Do I need to do it, or can someone else actually do that? And would it actually be good for them if they did it as well? Because it would be a growth opportunity for them. So my self-care, to answer your question, is really about making sure I kind of keep sort of that part of the work, in under some sense of control, right? And Rima, who's here tonight, often is one of the people that I talk to, and give her a call, and she can sometimes say to me, perhaps you've just got a bit too much on your plate, and delegate some things and those sorts of things. So therefore, talking to others helps me as well, because sometimes I can't see the forest for the trees. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's self-imposed expectations that we define.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know if you recall, I guess Angela Colby, she mentioned something similar last month as well, how, well-being is setting a safe, psychologically safe space for her team was so important, and how she would actually circle back from her team to her, keeping her accountable as well with her own health and well-being. Interesting. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So leadership lesson, is there any leadership lesson, any story, anything that you'd like to share around those lines with the group tonight?
I think it's about being the leader that you sort of want to see in others, turning up as that leader. I think that's the most important thing for me, and being authentic in that. So yeah, that's and being an accessible leader. I think, and what I mean by accessible is having time for people to have conversations with them that aren't just about the immediate topic, but having time to connect and grow and develop. Because I think, often, within in Accenture, we often get feedback that, people don't feel like they have access to leaders, and so to me, it's about being accessible. There's no reason why someone can't have a conversation, and why I'm not also making the time to talk to people. So yeah, being accessible as well.
And I'm sure you're doing really well, Lisa, because that's probably one of the words that I use in introduction, and that's the word that comes to mind when I think of you. Approachable. Back then already, humble, approachable, down to earth. So yes, some of your many qualities from my memory. So any final words, Lisa, in terms of what we discussed? Any other thoughts? I remember you mentioned this story of the pilot, and how sometimes leaders is important, to try to keep all together. And do you know what story I'm talking about?
Oh, the pilot that landed the plane on the Hudson River.
Yeah.
Someone was talking about the story, and they asked him, what was he thinking at that point in time when he had to land that plane? I think he had like 2 minutes or something, like, to figure out what he was going to do. And he had like 200 people on that aircraft or something like that. And they said to him, how did he not get stressed and like completely freak out? And he kind of said that, if I remember it correctly, that he kind of knew that if he freaked out, everyone on the plane would freak out. And so he just knew he had to be calm, and he had to just lead them all through it. The staff on the plane and the passengers and those sorts of things. So I think then that goes back to that, my reflection is that I want to be a leader, and in terms of being calm and those sorts of things, because when the minute I am not calm, which does happen, then, everyone around me is not necessarily calm either. So being sort of the leader that I want others to be a leader like as well. So, yeah.
Good. Thanks so much, Lisa. I don't know if you'll be able to stay with us for the rest of the evening.
I will try to keep going, because like Leanne, I'm recovering from COVID as well.
Oh,
so.
Okay. Oh, good. So thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully I'll see you in the next roundtable, Lisa. Thanks for donating your time.
That's okay. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.